Hi, everyone, and thanks for being with me. This is day 9 of my effort to talk about an activism, about us taking action against gender-based violence here in Australia. Now, as I said before, this is a United Nations initiative which I'm endeavouring to support as best as I can by having continual conversations with you about aspects of domestic violence, about strategies that you could use if this is an experience you have in your life, particularly if you're a male, and in an effort to find solutions to a problem which plagues this country, a problem which kills a woman once a week. It's horrific and something needs to be done about it. And also, we need to be mindful of the children who are impacted by domestic violence as well. That is important. So I'm up to day 9 now in talking about this particular problem. And you've got, I've produced a number of videos that hopefully are helpful, that have come from the work I've done over 30 years working with men in particular around domestic violence. Now, this probably won't be a very long video today, so bear with me, but I do want you to join me because this is really important. So it is important to understand aspects of domestic violence, and particularly ways, and my whole thrust has been to talk about a process, things that we might be able to do that would help to minimise or eliminate, hopefully, behaviour that causes damage to women and children. So today I'm going to talk about a concept that I call the gap. Now, the gap is that period between feeling angry, thinking angry thoughts, developing a narrative that is unhelpful, and acting upon that narrative. So what I've talked about in many of my groups is this process called the gap. So the gap is a period between the time that I start to think and feel a certain thing and react or behave badly. So there's a decision can be made in the midst of all of this that will be helpful to prevent the action from taking place in the first place. Now, I did a session, the last session I think was on timeout, and timeout certainly is part of that, and if you haven't watched that, I suggest you do, because it's an important aspect of helping to negotiate how to deal with and to manage moments where we start to feel angry. But there is a moment in which we know that the outcome that is going to be produced from what we're thinking and feeling will be detrimental to those people around us. And so we need to be able to be aware of that moment. Now, I've worked with many men around this, and one of the most obvious or indications that men struggle with this is the fact that they will say to me, well, Tony, that moment where I flare up is an instant. I can't control it. It just happens. I don't see it coming, blah, 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 and it just happens. And that is a myth. Something always happens to us, whether it is an emotion that we're feeling, whether it's thinking that we have around an issue, or whether it's something physiological that happens to us. And so we need to be mindful of all of those three things. I can remember working with a guy many years ago who did tell me that it was just, he was an extremely violent man, and he just blew up and it sort of blacked out. And when he came to, he would often find the people he was confronted would be laying on the ground next to him because he would beaten the crap out of them. And he was determined that this moment that he had was something over which he could not control. But when we had an in-depth conversation about it, what we discovered was that he had this sensation of blood rushing through from the bottom of his feet up through his legs and into his body. And when that sense of this rush of blood had reached his nose or around the middle of his face, he would black out. So even though he was saying that he hadn't, that he just flared up, it was just happened in a moment, and that he had no control, what he realised was that there was a physiological response to him becoming angry and blacking out. And we all have those responses. For some of us, they're in a moment. And for others, it happens over time. We become agitated. We become, start to have these thoughts about the other person that are really unhelpful. We have the feeling of resentment, of fear, of betrayal. Just look at that post I did on feelings and how to identify them. We will have a moment where we recognise what is happening. Sometimes that build-up happens over time. Sometimes it appears to happen in an instant. Now, the point is that when you have that moment, when you're aware, and this is the trigger, this is the point actually, is when you have that trigger, it is then that you can make a decision to not act in a way which is hurtful of another. And that's where things like time out comes in, or walking away from the situation. Now, if men in particular were able to acknowledge this moment, this gap between feeling, thinking, and physiological response, if they were able to acknowledge that in that moment, they would then be able to make a decision. The fact that men will also argue that someone made us do this, that someone said something to us that was offensive, that there was an ongoing pattern where, you know, she follows me around the room, she wants to resolve something, and I just get angry with her and I push her. There's always an incident in which you could take responsibility for your behaviour. Always. There's never an excuse not to. So I would suggest that you, if you're watching this video, you think a little bit about how it is that you respond, and make decisions about behaviour which is going to ensure that those people around you are safe. Now, let me know what you think. I've done a whole series of these videos, and subscribe to my channel, and I should put that further up the page, but I haven't. But let me know what you think, and whether or not there's something you could do that is different. Take care of yourself, everybody. Look after yourself. Look after those people around you. And more importantly, be safe.